We will make the next few years the golden age of infrastructure in the Philippines to enhance our mobility and connectivity and thereby spur development, growth, equitable in the country. In other words, we are going to build, and build.
And that, my friend, is what our President Duterte said during his second State of the Nation address. He wants to focus on infrastructure development nationwide. Well, there is no doubt that infrastructure development and its benefits is fundamental to economic activity. Fun fact, economists gave little recognition to infrastructure development until 1980s. Since then, David, I don't know how to pronounce his name, former professor of economics in the University of Michigan, authored papers on this topic which ascribe slowdown on US productivity growth to declines in investment in infrastructure. But of course, if you want to build, you have to spend. Gastos. Eh, namumblema na nga tayo kung saan natin kukunin yung budget para dun sa free tuition fee ng mga state universities and colleges. Fun fact, when President Duterte was asked where to get the budget for the free tuition fees, this is what he said.
Yan nga ang problema ngayon. Ewan ko, tingnan natin. Alam ko man na walang pera. Permahan natin ito, di sige. Yan ang problema natin.
So, going back, how could we finance these massive infrastructure projects? Glad you asked. I don't know. That's why we're gonna interview... Oh, I said crap. Scrap. I just remember may interview pala kami. Sorry guys, I have to go. Baka matraffic kami. Sige, bye. Speaking of traffic, sino sa inyo yung naaasar kapag traffic? Raise your hand. What do you think is the best solution for traffic? Is it constructing more roads? Or investing more on mass transit system? Went around campus and asked the same question. Let's see if we have the same ones.
I honestly prefer a mass transit system over building more infrastructure to resolve traffic. Particularly because I don't think there's any more room left for infrastructure like roads. Because if you're gonna see it, our population is really dense, and there are a lot of houses built like literally everywhere. So it's like an urban sprawl now. So if you build more roads, I think that there's gonna be a lot of opportunity costs. Either one, a lot of people will be displaced from their homes because like we're gonna have to build more infrastructure. Or second, it'll take a significant amount of long time to like build more, which will cause more traffic. Mass transit system is, I think, better kasi I feel na our room for a mass transit system, like for example, overpass or even underground, I feel na it gives us more room to operate it compared to an infrastructure where there's very little opportunity.
The transportation system should be prioritized over infrastructures because that's one way that the traffic in Manila could be lessened if people have an option to take the transportation instead of using their own cars on the road. And I think if more people use the public transportation, then the building of the infrastructure should be smoother and less chaotic compared to now.
I think the government should focus on improving on mass transportation because based on my observation in our school, I see that most of the students that go to the school use the public transportation, and it will be more beneficial to my fellow students if the government fixes mass transportation.
Personally, I would choose the improvement of the mass transit system because as a commuter, it's difficult to ride GPs when it's outdated, and sometimes you have like really temporal GP drivers that, I don't know, it's just not convenient because sometimes there are GP drivers that are not nice and they're just rude. So I feel like in the more improved mass transit system, everyone in every sector of society can access this and would use it in their daily lives. And yeah, it would benefit the whole Philippines, especially the working class.
So for me, kailangan improve yung mass transit system kasi like there are so many ways na yung public gumagamit ng jeep, ng bus, tricycle. And isa to sa mga dahilan kung bakit nagka-traffic kasi hindi na control yung number nila. So imagine nyo na lang if like marami tayong trains and whatever. So parang for me, mas madali yun. Kasi like it's mass transportation. So like marami siyang nasasakay. Pero at the same time, hindi siya nagkakos ng traffic. Wala siya sa roads. Pero kasi yung problem of building it, hindi lang yung money problem mo, but the time and the hassle. Pero worth it naman siguro kung titiisin.
Personally, for me, I choose the improvement of mass transit because currently I'm using trains as a way to go to school, and I feel like mas maraming places na matatap pag mass transit. Also, environmentally, I feel like it's more beneficial kasi parang hindi na masyadong marami yung gas emissions in terms of pag inayusin yung road, then mas ma-encourage yung mga tao na gamitin yung cars nila. And I feel like there was this part where back in our majors, sinabi ng professor namin na the true measure of development of a country is not how many cars a country or people own in a country, but how many people use the mass transit as a way to go to point A, from point A to point B.
So if the government had to pick which one to prioritize more, I would pick the mass transportation. Because in our society, here in the Philippines, it's very prevalent that people use public transportation to get to wherever they need to go and to be able to make it more effective. And for them, they should try to improve that para it's easier for Filipinos to get there.
For me, I think the government should focus on improving the mass transportation here in the Philippines simply because I think that more people would actually choose to ride the public transportation rather than buying their own cars and stuff.
In my opinion, I feel that the mass transportation should be the one prioritized because since the Philippines is a poor country, more use mass transportation like trains and buses rather than buying cars and using roads. So if the public transportation is fixed, then I feel that it would help lessen traffic and other problems.
For me, dapat masayusin yung infrastructure ng public transport kasi parang di lang maayos yung traffic sa pag-ayos ng mga kalsada kasi sobrang dami na talagang may kotse sa Pilipinas. Tapos, pag inayos yung transport system, mga may kotse, mas pipiliin na nila mag-commute kasi di magastos sa gas, sa parking, and yun.
Mas pipiliin ko yung mass transport system kasi as compared to building more roads would require space. Although it requires space to build mass transport systems, it can accommodate the increasing population of the people. And when you have an efficient system, it can also affect the paggalaw, yung pag-mobilize mga tao, pag-mobilize ng ideas, ng codes. So, mabilis yung paggalaw, but it can also contribute to the growth of the economy.
I'm Dr. Alexis Filione of the Civil Engineering Department under the Transportation Engineering Division. Of course, the main culprit of traffic congestion are the private car users, and because of the congestion, when we travel from our homes going to school or people from their homes going to work, so we suffer delays. So I think if you have delay, that's also cost. And in that case, as mentioned by a study by JICA, we lost around 2.4 billion pesos a day due to traffic congestion. The approach I use in my research is the one developed in Japan by the Institute for Global Environmental Studies. The approach uses not only economic and social analysis, but it also includes the environmental impact of the project. So when you say environmental impact, you put a cost on the harmful emissions due to harmful gases that usually come from vehicles that are using the road.
Sir, in doing this evaluation, doing this analysis, what do you think is the best solution for traffic congestion?
Of course, as I have mentioned earlier, the main reason why we have congestion are the car users. Of course, we cannot. The main reason, of course, why people use their cars because we have inefficient public transport system. So the best way is to improve our mass transit system so that people who are using their cars will be encouraged to shift to public transport. So that if you have less cars on the road, so there will be less congestion.
Would you agree, sir, that if the previous administrations focused more on massive transportation rather than focusing more on constructing more roads, do you agree that the traffic congestion would be lesser now?
I think the Aquino administration have several mass transport projects also, and even if we build more roads, so I'm also in favor of building expressways because of course we have limited expressways compared to other neighboring countries. But what is important is the revenue you earn from the expressway should be channeled to the improvement of our mass transit system.
All the best masterpieces start from one line, and a single line begins with a dot. Here in the Philippines, finding and connecting the dots that may lead to our masterpiece already seems a tough task. Too many needs, and they all seem too big to fill. But will we let any of these stop us? The good news is, the government does not stop at anything. This is why DPWH, DBM, DOF, NEDA, DOTR, and BCDA are all working together for the first time in history. 6 agencies committed to deliver the boldest and most ambitious infrastructure development ever. 6 agencies ushering in the golden age of infrastructure, which we call Build, Build, Build. This is the vision that will help us achieve our goals. And today, we put this vision into action. With the NLX SLX connector, you can go from Alabang to Balintawak in only 30 minutes. No need to pass through EDSA anymore, so you can use your time for more important things. NLX will also get an all-elevated expressway in Harbor Link, providing a 10-minute access from Mindanao Avenue to Commonwealth Avenue. We are also building a tide embankment project in Leyte, Visayas, which will protect communities in coastal areas against destructive storm surges. No successful country is without an efficient public transport system. So we are extending our trains with PNR North that goes to Clark, and PNR South, which will connect Manila to Los Baños. Explore Davao, Surigao, and Cagayan de Oro without the hassle via the Mindanao Railway. The upcoming Mega Manila subway will also help decongest the roads. For Phase 1, we are connecting Quezon City and Taguig, with more still coming down the road. With the BGC to NAIA bus rapid transit system, you can go from Fort Bonifacio to NAIA in only 20 minutes. We are also expanding the Clark International Airport with new first-class facilities. And the smartest and greenest city in the Philippines is also rising in Clark, which we call the New Clark City. a world-class urban development that will solve Metro Manila's congestion problems. These are but a few of the projects that will blaze a new trail for us, with more coming in the next months and few years. Build for progress, because change only starts through action. Build for tomorrow, because our children deserve a better Philippines. Build with us, and be a guardian of transparency through the Build, Build, Build portal. Visit www.build.gov.ph and stay in the know about all of our game-changing projects. Together, let us build the Philippines.
Hi, my name is Eliazar Ricote. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the PPP Center. The PPP Center is a government agency mandated to be the lead coordinating and monitoring body of all PPP projects. Public-private partnership is a development strategy. It's part of the government's strategy to realize development projects, particularly infrastructure and related development undertakings. It's anchored on the government's recognition of private sector as partner in development, and we have also laws that provide for that, such as the Build Offer Transfer Law, and we have launched a PPP program to entice private sector to participate and invest in infrastructure development projects. First is a development strategy. It's part of our development program. In fact, through several regimes, even as early as Ramos, Strada, there were already in the development programs of these regimes targets for projects to be done, to be helped by private sector in construction, operations, maintenance. Number two is a financing strategy, because we look at private sector finance as a resource. We have very limited resources to fund our huge infrastructure and development requirements. So of course we have our regular budget, GAA, that's normally limited. We also have development support, we call it official development assistance. We get from our bilateral and multilateral partners. As you have heard, China is very eager to help us through several ODA support for projects. Third would be PPP. And current administration's reference to hybrid PPPs is in fact that combination of financing options, financing sources, appropriations, so GAA, our budget, official development assistance, and then private sector through PPPs. And number three, as I said in the discussion, it's a mechanism to bring in efficiencies. Private sector doesn't just bring in financing, they also bring in efficiencies in construction, design, operations, and other innovative, creative ways of service delivery. What their ICT and other technology inputs that the government may not have or may not have access to or cannot afford it. And finally, I said PPP is a procurement option, because when you engage, when you procure, you select private sector to help you in development projects in various aspects, operation, maintenance, construction, or combinations of them. You don't use the regular procurement law. You use a separate procurement process.
Sir, it's very evident in Duterte's administration that he pivoted our economy to China from the west to the east. And actually he got, when he visited China, he got a massive chunk of aid. So how big are we talking about here?
We don't have the exact amount yet, but I heard in the papers today around 124 billion was or around that figure was listed as the commitments from the Chinese government to help us in these projects. I understand also that aside from China, the administration went to other development partners, Japan. I think they even went to Russia. There's a Russian delegation coming here. I understand they also had support coming in from Australia. It's not just China. I think the more popular ones that come out, this is China, but government's really looking at several bilateral partners to help us in financing our infrastructure.
China buys control of a port in Sri Lanka for the next 99 years. Angry Sri Lankans complain a Chinese colony is being built, while government leaders insist Chinese debts need to be repaid. Is the deal too high a price to pay?
Protesters fear a Chinese colony is being created and the government will take their land to build industrial zones set up with Chinese investors.
China takes control of a Sri Lankan port on one of the world's busiest shipping routes. It's all part of its ambitious plan to create a new Silk Road.
Sri Lanka owes China a huge chunk of money from ODA, Official Development Assistance, $64 billion in number. These investments are used in building infrastructure projects, and most of the projects are not producing adequate returns. About 95% of Sri Lanka's revenue is used to pay this massive debt, and many local citizens feel that their country is slowly being sold to the Chinese government. Could you comment about these cases?
This has been raised as a major case to argue against our direction to really tap ODA for China. They've been saying there's experience in the region. Countries who have tapped the ODA of China eventually get heavily indebted and ends up paying from their own coffers the revenues. If you can see at the case, the significant point there is that the infrastructure projects built from this ODA support did not generate the adequate revenues they expected, because if it did, and I'm sure that was what they were looking at, these projects funded by the China support will be generating revenues and therefore sustain itself and facilitate repayment of this debt. In the case of Sri Lanka, it did not, so that it became an indebtedness of the government and we had to pay for it from their revenues. The Secretary of Finance here in the Philippines has been raising that as something they are very conscious about in this whole ODA program. I remember in the newspaper that day, he was saying we were very careful about this ODA loan from China. And we'll make sure that this project that get funded from the ODA will have mechanisms to be repaid from the projects so that they won't recourse to our budget or swap the debt with equity and therefore get us heavily indebted to China. We're conscious, the administration is conscious about these cases before, and they're looking at mechanisms as to how this ODA coming in will be managed so that this similar case will not happen.
Sir, another issue that's brought out of this partnership with Sri Lanka and China, Chinese government with those projects in hand actually they employed their own companies to work with these projects. Yeah. So instead of generating employment in Sri Lanka, Chinese is taking advantage of these projects to actually generate employment in their country. So how could we prevent this from happening?
Well, that's the very nature of official development assistance. Countries who provide support to other countries is normally part of the deal. We bring in money to your country, provide assistance. With some caveats, we bring in our people as well. But I remember, I think it was in the news yesterday, Secretary Dominguez of DEVFINA was asked that very question. And he said, we will employ locals for this China-funded projects here. We will only allow Chinese experts to come here as part of that agreement for specific consulting and work requirements that are not available here. Because our procurement laws here require that. We should employ best local people and only hire external clients, external workers or consultants or experts if those aren't available here. I think that's a condition this administration is very conscious of and made part of the deal.
It's 64 billion is a huge debt.
Of course.
How could we prevent this unpayable debts from happening in the Philippines?
I think you should ask the Secretary of Finance. As I said, it's precisely
should
that.
I appoint?
The other day I was at the presentation of the budget to Congress 2018 budget, and they were presenting that. Yes, there's a big chunk of our resources to be sourced from ODA funding, But there's also a big percentage of that to come from our budget. There's a lot of resources in Germany that we need to spend. It's really reinforcing each other, and then ensuring they're not looked at as individual, independent undertakings, but something that goes well into one consolidated financing, or they call it infrastructure spending program.
Is like in theory, spending of the government spending, if it's increased, it increases GNI. So focusing on infrastructure projects, is there a correlation in spending, increasing spending, focusing on infrastructure projects and the growth of the economy?
Yeah. In fact, in the 10-point agenda of the president, you must have seen agenda number 4, I guess. He was relating to infrastructure spending as a percentage of GDP. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, 5% in 2016. I remember in the last hearing, the targeted infrastructure spending for 2018 is 6.7, and the target is around 2020 we would have already mobilized around 7% of GDP for infrastructure. Because compared to our neighbors in the region, we're lagging behind in terms of that spending from our GDP relative to infrastructure requirements. Principally because infrastructure is the facilitator, the connector. It what facilitates trade, and movement, and people, and action, and consumer spending, basic economics.
For me, my conclusion is that the people and all the students interviewed said one collective answer, and that is to enhance and develop our mass transport system rather than building more bridges or developing more roads, since they think that by developing the mass transportation system like the buses and the jeepneys, more people would rather use those public transport vehicles and systems because they're developed rather than building more bridges and building more roads, which entails more cars on the road and does nothing. So that's it. Thank you.
With the Build program of the current administration, the administration of President Duterte, this would, at first glance, this would entail a lot of spending coming from the government. But if you look closely, PPP, or the public-private partnership, is helping to finance these projects that would entail a lot of money and a lot of spending to do. The hybrid PPP of the current administration is not only accepting funding from the private sector, but also accepting funding from ODAs and other support coming from the international entities. So with these, the only thing that should matter is how to allocate these financial support from international entities and not to be tricked by these ODAs that would hinder the development.
To conclude the topic, the government should prioritize on building and improving the infrastructures like roads, bridges, because this will lessen the traffic. This is the main traffic is one of the main problems because we lose around 2.4 billion pesos a day because of the time in traffic that people spend. And what follows is the next thing to do is to fund and finance the improvement of the public transportations, so that because this will help and this will make people realize that it will be easier to commute than bringing their own cars because they know that the public transportation will be improved and will be more efficient compared to what we have.
To conclude, the improvement of mass transport system is needed, such as the improvement of buses, trains, jeeps, and the like. With this, this can greatly reduce traffic congestion. And as such, in partner with the improvement of the mass transport system, there's needed improvement also for infrastructure systems such as roads, bridges, and the like. With this in mind, the government right now needs the PPP. With this, the private sectors and also the government, hand in hand, have collaborated together to use the resources wisely to allocate for certain projects.
To conclude, the improvement of mass transport system is needed, such as the improvement of buses, trains, jeeps, and the like. With this can